The void had always been silent. For centuries, humanity had expanded into the stars, reaching further and further into the galaxy with every passing decade. Yet the same question persisted, growing louder with every barren world and dead system. Where is everyone? In the year 3284, the question gained a sinister new weight. A series of anomalies near the galactic core began spreading outward, devouring entire systems. First, the stars themselves dimmed, as though consumed by an unseen predator. Then came the collapses, planets, moons, even asteroids disappearing into empty voids. No light, no debris, not even radiation was left behind. Astronomers called it the Dark Cascade, a phenomenon that defied explanation. On the bridge of Sol's Ascendant, the pride of humanity's exploration fleet, Captain Elias Vorn reviewed the latest reports. The holographic projection of the galactic map flickered, the red tendrils of the cascade spreading ominously toward the colonized regions of space. "We've lost contact with the Eridan colony," Lieutenant Adrienne Kale reported, her voice tense. "No distress signals, no debris. It's like they were never there." Vorn's jaw tightened. Eridan had been a thriving mining world on the edge of human expansion. Over 3 million souls were gone, without warning, without a trace. "Add it to the list," Vorn said gruffly, turning away from the map. His gray eyes carried the weight of too many losses. "Dr. Mira, what's the status on the anomaly?" Dr. Callan Mira, a brilliant yet unassuming xenophysicist, stood at her station, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her console. She adjusted her glasses, a relic from a time before genetic enhancements rendered poor vision obsolete. "The cascade is accelerating," she said, her voice calm but tinged with unease. "What started as isolated events near the core has spread exponentially. At this rate, we could see coreward colonies affected within a few months." "And the cause?" Mira hesitated. "Unknown, but there's a pattern. These voided systems, they form a path. If we extend the trajectory, it leads directly to the coordinates of an ancient alien station, recently discovered by a survey drone but never explored." Vorn frowned. "Why wasn't it flagged earlier?" "Because it's dead," Mira replied, her tone grave. "The station orbits a star that no longer emits light. It's unnatural." The captain turned to the bridge crew. "Set course for those coordinates. If there's a chance we can get answers, we'll take it. Humanity is running out of time." As Sol's Ascendant powered its engines and leaped into faster-than-light travel, an unease settled over the crew. They had seen their share of cosmic mysteries, black holes, rogue planets, ancient ruins, but the cascade felt different. It wasn't natural. Hours later, the ship arrived at the dead system. The sight chilled everyone aboard. The star, once a brilliant beacon, was now a blackened sphere. Around it, the alien station drifted in silence, its surface pocked and broken. It looked ancient, older than any human structure, its architecture both haunting and beautiful. "Scan the station," Vorn ordered. "Picking up faint energy signatures," Kale said. "But the power source? It's alien, unlike anything we've seen before." Vorn nodded. "Prepare a landing team. We're going in." The exploration of the station revealed vast, empty halls and shattered technology. In the central chamber, Mira found the shard. It hovered above a pedestal, pulsing faintly as though alive. The moment she touched it, the ship's systems flickered, and a voice whispered in her mind, "Beware the rising shadow. Your light will not last." In that instant, the shard erupted with dark energy, throwing Mira back. The crew scrambled to retreat as the station began to collapse, but Mira clutched the shard tightly, her scientific curiosity overpowering her fear. As the Ascendant fled the dying station, the shard pulsed again, projecting a holographic image into the ship's bridge. A galaxy consumed by darkness, stars winking out one by one. The image faded, leaving a single phrase etched into the air: Your species is next. The mood aboard Sol's Ascendant was tense. The alien shard, now secured in a reinforced containment field in the science lab, radiated an unsettling energy. It hummed faintly, like a heartbeat, its dark surface shifting with streaks of unnatural light. No one could look at it for long without feeling an oppressive weight pressing on their minds. Dr. Kellen Mira sat at her console, reviewing the data they had gathered from the artifact. Her hands trembled slightly as she replayed the whispered words it had sent directly into her mind. "Beware the rising shadow." The phrase echoed in her thoughts, no less chilling now than when she first heard it. Captain Elias Vorn entered the lab, his usual stern expression even grimmer. "Report," he said, folding his arms. Mira glanced at him, her face pale. "The shard, it's more than just a remnant of alien technology. It's active, alive in a sense. Its energy signature is unlike anything we've encountered, and it's growing stronger the longer we keep it aboard. Can we isolate it?" "We already have, but its influence isn't limited to physical containment. The crew," she hesitated. "Several have reported nightmares. Vivid, violent dreams they can't shake. A few have been showing signs of paranoia." Vorn's jaw tightened. "And you?" Mira hesitated again, her hand brushing against her temple. "I'm fine, for now." The captain studied her for a moment, then nodded. "What's your assessment? Is this shard a weapon, a warning, or something worse?" "Maybe all three," Mira replied. She tapped her console, bringing up the holographic projection of the galaxy the shard had shown her. "This image, it isn't just a vision. It's a recording. A record of what happened to the civilization that created it." "Destroyed by the rising shadow," Vorn muttered, staring at the darkened galaxy. Mira nodded. "And if we don't figure out what this thing is trying to tell us, we could be next." Before Vorn could respond, the lights flickered across the ship, and a deep, resonant hum echoed through the corridors. "Bridge to Captain Vorn." Lieutenant Adrian Kale's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got a situation." On the bridge, the crew was on edge. The ship's systems were glitching sporadically, monitors displaying static interspersed with strange, jagged symbols. "What the hell is going on?" Vorn demanded as he stormed onto the deck. "The artifact is emitting some kind of energy pulse," Kale said, her fingers flying over her console. "It's interfering with ship-wide systems. Power fluctuations, life support instability, even navigation is affected." As if to punctuate her words, the holographic star map of the galactic core flickered, and then the Sentinel appeared for the first time. The shimmering, humanoid figure was made of faint light and static, its form fragmented and incomplete. Its voice was deep and layered, as if multiple entities spoke in unison. "I am the Sentinel." The crew froze, eyes locked on the apparition. "What are you?" Vorn asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The last remnant of the Protectors. We fought the rising shadow. We failed." The Sentinel's image flickered violently, its voice laced with static. "The shadow consumes. It corrupts. It erases." Dr. Mira stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Why show us this? Why did you leave this shard behind?" "To warn. To prepare. Your kind may succeed where we could not." The Sentinel turned its glowing eyes toward Vorn. "The shadow has seen you now. It will come. Prepare or perish." As the Sentinel's image faded, the bridge went silent. Vorn turned to his crew, his expression grim. "We've got our answer. The shadow isn't a phenomenon. It's an enemy, and it's already hunting us." The shard hummed louder, as if in agreement. The tension aboard Sol's Ascendant was now palpable. Since the appearance of the Sentinel, the artifact's influence had only grown stronger. What started as subtle glitches in the ship's systems had escalated into power surges and inexplicable malfunctions. The lights flickered almost constantly, and the faint hum of the shard seemed to follow the crew wherever they went. Captain Elias Vorn leaned over the command console on the bridge, staring at the latest reports from Earth. Communications from several colonies were becoming erratic, filled with strange, disjointed transmissions. Even the high command back on Earth seemed hesitant to confront what was happening. "Captain," Lieutenant Adrian Kale called out, breaking his concentration. "We've just received a signal from the frontier world of Rescor. It's fragmented, but you need to hear this." "Put it through," Vorn ordered. The distorted voice of a planetary governor crackled through the speakers, filled with static and panicked shouting. "Not natural. The people, they're seeing things, hearing things." Entire settlements' air, the signal dissolved into screams and a strange, low vibration that sent a chill through the bridge crew. Kale muted the audio. "That's the third colony we've lost contact with this week." "Is it the Shadow?" Vorn asked, his voice calm but strained. Dr. Callan Mira, standing by one of the auxiliary consoles, nodded grimly. "It's possible." The Sentinel mentioned the Shadow's ability to manipulate its prey, fracturing their unity. If the Shard is drawing its attention, these incidents may be the first signs of its influence spreading. Vorn's hands tightened into fists, and the High Command? What's their response? Kale hesitated before replying. "They've issued a sector-wide blackout on information about the Cascade and the Shadow. They don't want to cause panic." "Cowards," Vorn muttered. "They're afraid of what they don't understand, and they'll wait until it's too late to act." In the science lab, Mira studied the Shard under heavy containment. Its energy readings had spiked, and the pulsating light within it had become erratic, almost frantic. She adjusted the scanners, her frustration mounting. "You're trying to tell us something," she whispered. "But what?" The Shard flared suddenly, flooding the lab with a blinding light. Mira staggered back as images assaulted her mind, a kaleidoscope of destruction and despair. She saw cities consumed by darkness, their inhabitants screaming in silence. Ships, entire fleets, disintegrated into dust. And then she saw Sol's ascendant, adrift and broken, swallowed by an endless void. The Sentinel's voice cut through the chaos. "You must understand. The Shadow thrives on fear. It fractures, divide and conquer. The Shard is a key, but it is also a door. Beware its cost." Mira collapsed to the floor, gasping for air as the vision subsided. She stared at the Shard, its light now dim and steady. For a moment, she thought it almost looked alive, watching her with patient curiosity. In the mess hall, the effects of the Shard were becoming impossible to ignore. Crew members whispered of vivid nightmares and fleeting shadows at the edges of their vision. Tensions flared as arguments broke out over trivial matters. One officer, Ensign Work, slammed his tray onto the table, his voice shaking. "Don't you see what's happening? That thing in the lab is poisoning us. We need to get rid of it before it destroys us all." "You think the captain doesn't know what he's doing?" Another crew member shot back. "We're here to find answers, not run away." Before the argument could escalate further, the ship lurched violently. An alarm blared across the deck. "All hands to stations." Vorn's voice rang out over the comms. On the bridge, the holographic star map showed a swarm of unidentified objects closing in fast. "What are they?" Vorn demanded as Kale analyzed the data. "Energy constructs," she said, her voice tight. "No recognizable design, but they're draining power from our systems." As the crew scrambled to mount a defense, Mira arrived on the bridge, her face pale but determined. "It's the Shadow Scouts," she said, her voice resolute. "They're testing us, probing our defenses." "Then they're about to get a fight," Vorn growled. The Ascendant launched a barrage of plasma rounds at the constructs, but the energy weapons barely slowed them down. The constructs absorbed the attacks, growing brighter and faster. Mira's mind raced, piecing together fragments of the Sentinel's warnings. "It's not about brute force," she shouted. "We need to disrupt their cohesion. Target the energy links binding them together." Under Mira's guidance, the crew recalibrated their weapons, firing targeted EMP bursts. The constructs faltered, their glowing forms flickering before dissolving into nothingness. As the last construct vanished, the ship went silent once more, save for the faint hum of the shard. Vorn exhaled, his gaze hard as he turned to Mira. This was just the beginning, wasn't it? Mira nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. The Shadow knows we're here, and it's coming. The battle with the Shadow Scouts left Saul's Ascendant shaken but intact. Repairs began immediately, but the crew's morale hung by a thread. The lingering dread of what lay ahead was as oppressive as the vacuum of space. Captain Elias Vorn knew they couldn't stay adrift forever. In the dimly lit briefing room, the senior officers and Dr. Mira gathered around the central holotable. The shard, still contained in its reinforced chamber, loomed in the minds of everyone present. The Sentinel's warnings echoed like a ghost haunting the ship. Repairs are at 65%, Lieutenant Kale reported, her voice steady despite the tension. Weapon systems are functional, but our energy reserves are dangerously low. Another fight like that, and we'll be defenseless. Vorn nodded grimly. What about the shard? Can it help us fight the Shadow? Mira hesitated, looking down at her datapad. The shard is complicated. Its energy is unlike anything we've seen. If we could harness it, it might give us an edge. But there's a risk. Its influence on the crew is growing. Nightmares, paranoia, hallucinations. It's already pushing us to the brink. We don't have a choice, Vorn said, his voice hard. If we don't fight, the Shadow will wipe us out. Mira locked eyes with him, her voice calm but insistent. If we rush this, we might destroy ourselves before the Shadow even arrives. Before Vorn could reply, the ship's lights flickered again, and an alert blared. Kale tapped her console, her face pale as she read the data. Captain, we've detected a massive energy signature 2 systems away. It's like the shard, but orders of magnitude larger. Vorn frowned. Another artifact. Or a trap, Mira said, her tone grim. But if it's real, it could be the key to understanding the Shadow and stopping it. Hours later, Saul's Ascendant arrived in the next system. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. A massive alien structure, shaped like an intricate web of dark metal and glowing veins, floated in the shadow of a dying star. The structure dwarfed the ship, its scale beyond comprehension. It's a fortress, Mira whispered, scanning the structure. Or what's left of one. It looks ancient, but it's still active. Active how? Vorn asked, his eyes narrowing. Power signatures are off the charts, Mira replied, and I'm detecting faint traces of the same energy that destroyed the scouts. It's familiar. Before the crew could process her words, the shard in the containment field began to hum louder, its pulse synchronized with the structure. A wave of dark energy surged from the shard, disrupting the ship's systems and bathing the bridge in flickering shadows. Something's waking up, Kale said, panic creeping into her voice. The holographic star map lit up, projecting an image of the fortress. Symbols and diagrams filled the air, their meaning indecipherable. Then the Sentinel's fractured image appeared once more, flickering and unstable. This is the Crucible, it intoned. A weapon against the Shadow, but it was never completed. A weapon? Vorn asked, stepping closer to the projection. Built by those who came before you, the Sentinel said. The last line of defense. To wield it is to risk everything, but without it, you will fail. Mira studied the projections, her mind racing. The shard, it's a key, isn't it? It's meant to activate the Crucible. The Sentinel flickered violently, its voice strained. Beware. The Crucible will draw the Shadow. If you choose this path, there is no turning back. Vorn looked at Mira, then at the rest of his crew. We've already been seen. There's no hiding now. If this Crucible is a chance to fight back, we take it. Captain, Mira said, her voice firm despite the doubt gnawing at her. This isn't just about survival anymore. If we activate the crucible, we're declaring war. Vorn's jaw tightened. Then let's make it a war they'll never forget. As the crew prepared to dock with the crucible, the shard's pulse grew faster, almost frantic, as though it were alive and anticipating what was to come. The fortress loomed ahead, its dark surface reflecting the faint light of the dying star. For a moment, there was silence across the ship. Then Vorn's voice cut through it. All hands, prepare for the unknown. Whatever's inside that thing might be our last hope, or the end of us. The Ascendant moved closer, its shadow merging with the ancient structure. The crucible awaited, its secrets and dangers locked away, ready to be unleashed. The docking clamps hissed as Saul's Ascendant latched onto the ancient structure. A faint tremor ran through the ship as the airlock synchronized. Beyond the bulkhead, the crucible loomed, its dark corridors silent and waiting. Captain Elias Vorn stood at the airlock, his helmet secured and his voice firm. Team Alpha, stay sharp. We don't know what's waiting for us inside. Mira, you're with me. Kale, you have the bridge. Lieutenant Kale saluted. Understood, Captain. Good luck. Vorn's team, clad in heavy exosuits, stepped through the airlock into the crucible's eerie interior. The walls pulsed faintly with veins of light, as though the structure was alive. Dr. Mira walked beside Vorn, her scanner emitting soft beeps as she mapped the complex energy patterns. This place is ancient, she said, her voice hushed. But the energy signatures are stable. It's almost as if the crucible has been waiting for us. Or something else, Vorn muttered, his hand resting on his plasma rifle. The team moved deeper into the structure, passing massive conduits that glowed with alien symbols. The air was thick with a strange hum that resonated in their bones. As they approached a central chamber, the shard in Mira's containment device began to glow, its hum matching the crucible's rhythm. We're close, Mira said, her voice tight with a mix of awe and apprehension. The central chamber was vast, its ceiling stretching high into darkness. A massive console stood in the center, surrounded by floating shards similar to the one they carried, though many were cracked or dim. At the heart of the console was a dark, spinning core, its light faint but pulsing steadily. This must be the crucible's core, Mira said, stepping forward cautiously. She placed the shard into a slot on the console, and the entire room came alive. Light surged through the walls, illuminating the alien carvings and casting the team in an ethereal glow. The Sentinel's image materialized once more, larger and more stable than before. Its fragmented voice echoed through the chamber. The crucible is the last of its kind, a weapon of defiance against the rising shadow. But it is incomplete. How do we finish it? Vorn asked, his voice cutting through the static. The shard you bring is a fragment of its power, but the core requires more. The energy of your kind, your resolve, your unity, can complete the crucible. Without it, this weapon will fail as we did. Mira frowned. What does it mean by our unity, energy transfer, neural synchronization? The Sentinel faltered, its form flickering. The shadow divides. To resist, you must act as one. But know this, activating the crucible will not go unnoticed. The shadow will come in its full strength. Let it come, Vorn growled. We'll be ready. Suddenly, the walls shook violently. Alarms blared in their helmets as Mira's scanner spiked with energy readings. Captain, we've got incoming. Kale's voice crackled over the comm. Something huge just dropped out of subspace, energy signatures off the scale. Before Vorn could respond, the chamber's walls lit up with projections of approaching shadow vessels, dozens of them, sleek and dark, converging on their position. Looks like we woke the beast, Vorn said grimly. The Sentinel's voice cut through the chaos. The crucible's defenses are dormant. Reactivation requires sacrifice. Will you proceed? Mira's heart raced as she analyzed the data flooding her console. If we don't, those ships will tear us apart, but reactivation might drain the Ascendant. We could lose everything. Vorn didn't hesitate. Do it. We're out of options. Mira's fingers flew over the console, synchronizing the crucible's core with the shard. The floating shards around the room began to orbit the core, their broken forms glowing faintly. The sentinel spoke once more. Your choice binds your fate. Let the crucible awaken. As the core flared to life, a shockwave of light surged outward, shaking the entire crucible. The approaching shadow ships faltered, their sleek forms flickering as the energy disrupted their cohesion. On the ascendant, Kale gripped her console as the energy surge overloaded the ship's systems. We've got power fluctuations across the board. Back in the chamber, Vorn steadied himself as the crucible's energy reached its peak. The sentinel's voice echoed one final warning. The shadow is coming. Prepare for war. The crucible had awoken, and with it, the galaxy's final hope, or its doom. The pulse of the crucible sent ripples through the vast structure, causing the walls to vibrate as the core hummed with newfound power. Mira staggered back, eyes wide in shock as the energy surged through her, channeling into the shard. She could feel the raw force of it, like a living thing demanding release. Vorn gripped his rifle tighter, his pulse quickening. Status, Mira. Is the crucible ready? I think so, she replied, her voice strained as she fought to regain her bearings. The shard's resonance is fully integrated. The core is at full capacity. But the deep rumbling of the crucible's awakening was abruptly drowned out by the screech of an incoming transmission. Kale's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, the Shadows fleet is almost here. They've entered our orbit. They're too close. Vorn's heart raced, but his face remained resolute. Understood. Mira, activate the weapon. Now. Mira's hands moved swiftly, her fingers flying over the interface as the ancient machinery responded to her touch. The glowing shards in the room pulsed in rhythm with the core, and the entire structure seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the crucible released a torrent of energy, an immense shockwave of pure, raw force. Outside the crucible, the Shadow Fleet faltered. Their sleek black ships, once confident and relentless, now jerked violently, their energy shields crackling under the sudden onslaught. They weren't ready for this level of power. The wave struck them like a cosmic hammer, destabilizing their formations, their weapon systems flickering in and out of functionality. They're retreating. Kale's voice echoed in Vorn's earpiece. The wave knocked them off course, but they're regrouping. They're going to adapt, Captain. Vorn gritted his teeth. Then we'll give them something they can't adapt to. The shadow ships were reassembling themselves in a tight formation, their hulls slowly regaining stability as their engines came back online. It was clear that the initial shockwave had caused significant damage, but they were learning fast. Vorn knew that the crucible's initial blast had bought them only a few precious minutes. Captain, the crucible's power is waning, Mira warned, her voice edged with fear. We've exhausted the energy surge, and I don't know how long it will take to recharge. If we can't hold them off. We'll hold them off, Vorn interrupted firmly. We have to. Get the Ascendant in position. We'll need to make every second count. Vorn turned to the rest of his team. The fight had only just begun, and they were far from ready. They needed a strategy, and fast. We're going to have to use the Ascendant's weapon systems at full capacity. The Crucible may be able to disrupt their energy, but we need firepower to finish them off. I'll take the lead with the fighter squadron. Mira, you stay with the ship. We'll need your expertise to guide us through the assault. Mira nodded, though there was doubt in her eyes. But the Crucible? It's too unstable to use for much longer, Vorn said, his gaze hardening. We make our move now. On the bridge of Sol's Ascendant, Kale was already orchestrating the defense. All fighter pilots, launch on my mark. I want full engagement. Target the shadow ship's weak points. Keep them off the Crucible's back. As the first of the Shadow Fleet regrouped and moved in to retaliate, the Ascendant opened fire. Plasma beams and missiles streaked through the void, striking the enemy ships with blistering intensity. The shadow vessels retaliated, unleashing a barrage of dark energy, but the Ascendant's shields held firm under the onslaught. Vorn's voice came over the comms again, firm and commanding. "Squadron, on my command, push them to the Crucible's energy field. We need them close enough to disrupt their core systems." The fighters moved in, a flurry of precision and deadly coordination. The shadow ships were now on the defensive, their maneuvering hindered by the crippling wave from the Crucible and the constant barrage from the human fleet. Yet, despite the damage they were sustaining, the Shadow were relentless. Their vessels reformed, cutting through the chaos with cold, calculated efficiency. Each time one was struck down, another took its place. The scale of the attack was overwhelming. "Captain," Mira's voice rang out, filled with desperation. "We're running out of time. The shadow ships are regenerating too quickly. They're adapting, faster than we anticipated. We can't keep them at bay for long." Vorn's jaw clenched. "I know, but we're not stopping until we've won." The energy from the Crucible surged again, but it was not enough to halt the Shadow's counterattack. Vorn knew that this fight was no longer about just holding them off. It was about survival, about proving that humanity would not bow to the darkness of the void. The battle was only beginning. The battle raged in the void around the Crucible, a vicious dance between humanity's last hope and the cold, calculating force of the Shadow. Saul's Ascendant and the fleet of fighters launched from its hangars were the only things standing between the Shadow and the galactic annihilation they sought to bring. The fleet's guns fired with relentless precision, yet the shadow ships adapted to each new attack, their shields regenerating with impossible speed. Vorn watched the battle unfold from the cockpit of his fighter, his mind sharp and focused. The Ascendant was holding strong, but the Shadow were not only powerful, they were intelligent. Every move made by humanity was countered swiftly, their vessels shifting tactics with alarming precision. "Captain, we're losing ground," Kale's voice cut through his comms. "Their weapons are adapting faster than we can fire. Shields are starting to flicker. We won't be able to withstand much longer." "Noted, Lieutenant," Vorn replied. His voice was grim but steady. "We need to find a way to disable their adaptation. If they keep adjusting to our attacks, we'll never win." Mira's voice suddenly crackled through the calm, strained and anxious. "Captain, the Crucible's energy reserves are nearly depleted. We can't rely on it any longer. If we're going to do this, we need to take the fight directly to the enemy." Vorn's eyes narrowed as he analyzed the situation. The Shadow were not simply a threat, they were a strategy. They were systematic, moving with purpose, erasing any advantage humanity gained with each passing minute. His pulse quickened as the weight of their situation became clear. If they didn't take decisive action soon, the battle would be lost. Vorn to all fighters, prepare for a full-scale offensive. We're going to draw them in. Focus fire on their lead ships. If we can break their formation, the rest will crumble. He turned the fighter toward the enemy fleet, his heart pounding with determination. They couldn't afford to be on the defensive any longer. It was time for humanity to take control of the fight. As the Ascendant and its fighters continued to engage, Vorn led a calculated maneuver that drew the Shadow's primary fleet toward the center of their formation. Explosions rocked the void as human weapons collided with enemy shields, momentarily stunning the lead vessels. Kale's voice came over the comms again, clearer this time. "Captain, their formation is breaking apart. We've got them off balance. Push forward, finish them." Vorn's grip tightened on the controls. This was it. They had one chance to break through the Shadow's defenses. His fighter dodged a blast from a nearby ship, firing back as he banked toward the lead vessel, a massive Shadow warship, its form sleek and dark like the night itself. "Hold the line," Vorn shouted as he closed in. "We can do this." As the Lid warship locked its weapons on him, Vorn's mind raced. The energy from the crucible had disoriented them, weakened their defenses just long enough. He pulled his fighter into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding the shadow vessel's barrage, and then jetted up into the belly of the beast, targeting its engines. The rest of the fighters followed suit, attacking in coordinated strikes to disable the enemy ship's vital systems. "Target their engines now," Vorn barked. "We need them disabled." The fleet obeyed without hesitation, and within moments, the lead warship's engines exploded, sending it spinning into the darkness of the void. The rest of the Shadow Fleet hesitated, their once precise attacks becoming erratic. Without their leader, the rest of their forces faltered. But even in disarray, the Shadow weren't finished. The remaining ships closed in, desperate to regroup. "Captain, the Shadow's reinforcements are arriving from the far side of the system." Mira's warning was sharp. "They're bringing more ships than we can handle." Vorn swore under his breath. They'd never have enough time to regroup or prepare for this new wave. The Shadow were relentless, always sending more forces, no matter how many they lost. Humanity's options were running out fast. "Pull back," Vorn ordered. "Retreat to the Crucible. If we can use its last energy reserves, we may be able to buy enough time to take them down for good." The fighters returned to Sol's Ascendant, which was already making its way back toward the Crucible's defensive perimeter. As the ship's shields flickered, Kale worked furiously to keep them stabilized, but it was clear that the Ascendant was being stretched to its limit. The final wave of shadow ships was closing in fast, their numbers too great to ignore. On the bridge, Mira worked desperately to calculate their next move, the desperation in her voice palpable. "We're not going to survive another full assault, not with the Crucible drained of power." Vorn stood firm at the helm. "Then we'll make them believe we've already won." He was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. If it was the only way to save humanity from the rising darkness of the Shadow, then so be it. But as the Shadow Fleet neared, something unexpected happened. A massive energy surge from the Crucible, much stronger than before, erupted once more. The pulse surged out in every direction, not just affecting the shadow ships, but the entire battlefield. The unexpected surge threw the Shadow Fleet into disarray. Their ships flickered, their weapons offline. The wave wasn't over yet. Humanity had a chance, but only if they seized it now. The energy surge from the Crucible was like nothing anyone had ever seen. A tidal wave of light and power cascaded across the battlefield, drowning the Shadow Fleet in its brilliance. Their ships wavered in the void, their once imposing forms flickering and flickering as their systems overloaded and shut down. It was as if the very fabric of their being had been torn apart by the force of the pulse. For a brief moment, the stars around them seemed to dim, as if the universe itself held its breath. Then, with an immense crackling sound, the Shadow Fleet collapsed. Ships drifted lifelessly, their dark hulls smoking and torn, as their once fierce assault was brought to an abrupt halt. Vorn's hands gripped the controls of his fighter, his eyes wide with disbelief. Did we do it?" Mira's voice crackled through the comms. "The Crucible did it. It used the last of its power to send out a wave strong enough to shut them down." The Ascendant's shields were flickering dangerously, but the Shadow's warships were now scattered, drifting helplessly in space, their engines fried and weapon systems disabled. Only a few of the more resilient vessels remained intact, but they were no longer a threat. The Ascendant and the human fleet had, against all odds, broken the back of the Shadow's assault. But Vorn knew the cost. The Crucible had given everything. The energy reserves were spent. There would be no second wave. "Are they retreating?" Kale's voice broke through, the disbelief in his tone mirroring Vorn's own. "No," Mira answered sharply. "They're finished. The core systems of their fleet have been wiped out. The survivors are crippled. They won't be able to regroup, at least not for a long time." Vorn allowed himself a small breath, his mind still racing. "We've done it," he muttered, almost to himself. But at what cost? The truth weighed heavily on him. The Crucible's power was gone. The ship was damaged. The fleet, though victorious, was not unscathed. But there was no time for reflection, no time for grief. The universe was watching, and humanity had just taken its first step in ensuring its future. "Captain," Cale called again, his voice more urgent this time. "There's something else," a message from the shadow. Vorn's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The comms crackled, and an image appeared on Vorn's screen. It was faint, distorted, but the message was clear. A strange, alien face filled the screen. A being of immense, otherworldly presence, its eyes dark voids, its form shrouded in darkness, yet the unmistakable sense of intelligence and malice emanated from it. "You may have defeated us, human, but this war was never about victory. The rising shadow is inevitable. It always has been. This was but a delay." The voice was a guttural growl, full of cold disdain. Vorn's jaw clenched, but he didn't falter. "We've delayed it for as long as it takes. Humanity will fight on. We will never stop." The image flickered. The being's lips twisted into a silent grin, its final words chilling the very air. "Then we shall see, human, we shall see." The transmission cut off, and the screen returned to static. Vorn stared at the blank screen for a moment, the weight of the message settling into his bones. The shadow weren't done, but this was a victory, humanity's victory, and for the first time in centuries, it felt like they had a future. "Get the fleet to formation," Vorn said, his voice calm but resolute. "We've won this battle, but the war is far from over." Mira's voice came over the comms, quieter now, but filled with resolve. "But we've made our stand, and humanity will rise from this, no matter what." The fleet, battered and bruised, moved into formation, the Crucible now a distant memory in the midst of a hard-won victory. The battle against the shadow was far from over, but the message had been sent. Humanity had stood alone in the void and emerged victorious. But deep in the distance, the darkness still stirred, and the true fight for the future was only just beginning.